welcome back to Book Club. Reminder, in case you're having no idea what I'm talking about, this is the second session in the Synergy to Synastry feed, where we're going to be talking about a select group of chapters from Soul Rising. This is a book that I am a featured author in. There are 33 women who wrote chapters about their spiritual awakenings, and a whole lot of other wisdom and goodies in here. So today we're going to be talking about chapters 5 through 7, as teased in my last full episode. In case you didn't listen and watch, hello, the last installment where we covered chapters 1 through 4, you can definitely go back and watch it, but also the nature of this book is one that if you wanted to jump around, you're like, I want to read chapter 30 and then I want to read chapter 2. You can totally read the book that way. And as I mentioned in the last and first episode of this mini-series, I'm reading this book in a very unconventional way, which is that I'm channeling with my guides a block of time to sit, and as many chapters as I get through in that time while I'm taking a ridiculous amount of notes is how many I get through. I sit with that. I marinate. If they have a corresponding podcast interview, I listen to that. If they have a corresponding workshop from the book launch, I watch that. And then I cast out this recording time to break all of it down before I move on to the next session, which, as of recording right now, as an example, I haven't channeled the next session yet. And it's really because I have to fully clear this, process this first, and then I'll move forward. If you're worried about spoilers, I do share some details about what happens in the chapters, but I'm not doing a full recap, so it's relatively spoiler proof. I'm mostly talking about where my mind went, reflections, and anecdotes as I was experiencing these chapters. When I was reading chapter 5, I was struck pretty quickly by Grace's really just wise energy. Like it emanated from the page or, Kindle screen that I was reading off of. It really was palpable, and I felt like, I'm curious about her teachings. I would want to learn from her. I'd want to understand more. She seems like such an expert in her areas of practice. I'll talk a little bit more about those just as I go through my notes and reflections, but one of the themes that seemed really palpable in this chapter is the significance of detaching from outcome in order to support a manifestation practice. So this is something that we did learn when I did the Nuurvana school. That was like one of the teachings that Deganit had explicitly. And then we have talked about that. If you listen back to the planning versus manifesting episode at the beginning of season 2, that if we are stuck in attachment, I want this to work, I want this to happen, I want to receive this, we're not actually in a place to receive because we're tensed. We're in a want and a longing versus an openness. So I appreciated that as a bit of an undercurrent in her chapter because she was hoping certain things would work out in such a way, and then the universe intervenes, and don't we all know that tale as old as time? She did mention the 4 pillars, which is in a specific branch of astrology that I have not studied in Chinese astrology. And so I immediately, after reading her chapter, hopped on over to her website, filled out the form to generate my chart. But I looked at it, was like, I don't even know what I'm looking at here. So I saved it so I could do more of a deep dive later. I also then immediately went to my library website and I was searching, do they have any books that will talk about specifically the 4 pillars? Because just her brief mention of it, I was like, this sounds really interesting. And one of the goals that I have in 2026 is to expand my horizons with the type of astrological content, knowledge, wisdom, practices, and modalities so that I can expand my own understanding, because there's so many facets, and I feel pretty comfortable and locked in with what I am teaching now, but I want to keep learning. I want to keep growing and evolving. And so this really gave me a nice little nugget of something I can write down and come back to and look into more. Circling back to the bigger theme in this chapter around what the universe is doing, our connection to purpose. She was mentioning that our purpose can appear and present in very subtle ways. And I've already given examples on this podcast where you're receiving signs and synchronicities and being nudged along the way. Well, why is this happening? Why is that happening? Certain events that we believe are horrible at the time, that are a negative, it's a door closing, and yet it's realignment. I've heard this said about Saturn returns as an example, that it's like a chiropractor cracking you back into shape. So where you are misaligned, that's why certain things are shed, are falling apart, going away, no longer working anymore because they probably didn't work to begin with, or they just don't serve you now. They're not serving you in the next chapter that you're going to enter. Tying into a bit of human design, again, I'm not the resident expert on this podcast on that subject matter, but I have thought about it a lot more, just very simply from the Manigen perspective, that I've made so many adjustments and changes in how I'm thinking about what my purpose is, because as a manifesting generator, you have so many ideas, you want to do this, you want to do that, and then you can feel lost. Like, well, but then what is my purpose? Because it's this and this and this, and do they go together or do they not? Or is it a series of phases? And so I've gone back and forth a bit on that as well. And it really is just about trusting the process, the inspiration, like what lights me up. And maybe I had this idea and I started to work on it and I want to commit to it and I want to do that. And then time is passing. My energy is taking me somewhere else, or universe is interfering. All of a sudden there keeps being roadblocks. Those are signs. Maybe that's not the way to go anymore. Maybe it was just about the exercise of coming up with different ideas, and that's now out of date. And we have to pivot and we have to do something else. And that can be hard because you want to create that vision and make it a reality. And I wanted to share this quote just on the same topic. This is from page 42. So she says, quote, "If you are conscious and open enough, your destiny will purposefully yet unmistakably create an aperture for the magic to slip through." Shout out to Harry Styles, new single. And yeah, like the fact that also our purpose doesn't have to hinge upon anybody but ourselves. Like to back up here, I'm pretty sure I've told this on the podcast before, that when I had that first, well, my second ever psychic reading demo, the first one that really triggered me going down the psychic development path, he had told me, your purpose is to help people through talking. Like you're connecting with people in a few different ways. And of course, now it's like, well, I wasn't foreseeing at that time a podcast so many years before, but it is a medium of talking. I have a YouTube channel. I teach classes online. I do workshops in person, providing psychic readings, providing astrology readings, and then just being a regular person of like giving people advice are my 2 cents. When she was specifically calling out in this chapter, well, it doesn't have to be contingent upon helping others. Like that actually puts pressure. That spoke to me in particular because, well, I was told, again, do I have to be believing that my purpose is based on something that somebody told me now, like, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago? No. But I have been kind of repeating that to myself ever since he said that. And I have seen it present and they're like, well, I guess that is true. But even then, maybe I'll find that my sense of purpose or what that contribution is will change. But what Grace was talking about is if we're fully making it about other people rather than my purpose being something that will fuel me, that will help me, and then it doesn't have to be either fully or even partially or tangentially based on anybody outside of ourselves. Like our purpose is for us too. And I thought that was a really great message and just a little reality check. I mentioned before that Grace is involved in a few different modalities. And for anyone who has followed the podcast, episode 4, season 2, we talked about feng shui, and we are not experts. So we just did some research. We listened to some podcasts. We read some articles. We poked around and we got some info. But yeah, super cool to be in the same book as somebody who's a feng shui master. She was really emphasizing that we can harness our setup, our circumstances, our living environment to amplify our energy, to support us in feeling safe and relaxed. And ultimately, it doesn't have to be about wanting to manifest and make this thing happen. Again, that's like the control, it's the attachment. Well, I want this, so I'm going to put this crystal over here and I'm going to really hope that it works. If we are always using any modality from that lens, we're probably going to run into energetic blocks or obstacles or, for lack of a better way of saying it backfiring in some capacity because we're not actually working with the energy, we're trying to wield it. This was yet another really beautiful, heartfelt story. I love the inclusion of angel numbers and how the baby name came through, like the connection with her husband and the signs and nudges from her spirit team before she was even versed in any of that. I just think that it's so fun. I love stories like that. And how overall her arc was shifting towards gratitude and wonder. And isn't that what we were just talking about with grace? When you're listening, when you're open to receiving, even if you're not asking, they weren't asking, hey, what should we have the baby name be here? What should we do about this and that? And of course, the actual circumstances of this is, again, a great story. Definitely some trigger warning here. So keep that in mind. She kind of says up front the subject matter. When we can come from a different perspective, which is really the journey that she went on, that this whole experience, the challenges and everything allowed her to really connect to what is she grateful for? What is the bright side? When you connect to that higher vibrational energy, that's when you are opening the channels to receive. So even something that feels scary or negative or like a challenge or some sort of adversity or hardship can catapult us into the positive and being able to make those connections and meet the right people, change our boundaries, something that she was talking about. It's like it got her to this point of shedding people pleasing and recognizing these friendships aren't working, these relationships aren't working. It's taking stock, taking inventory. Is this a value add? No, because these people are of a different mindset. And friendships, it can be a partner that you are with, it could be dynamics with family, it can be with jobs. And really, the origin for this podcast was the fact that both Christine and I were in jobs, we were at certain companies, different industries, different lengths of time, really different circumstances around, what our experiences were there. But the loss, the negative thing, the adversity of being laid off and then going, oh, well, now what? But we were both able to be catapulted into something that was different. We were able to see things from a new perspective. Like I just did a reading for somebody the other day. I had read her previously like a whole year ago. And of course, when I read someone, especially like a 60-minute reading and some time goes by before they come back, I've dumped the recording from my computer. I haven't rewatched it. It goes right out of my brain. I have to tuck that away. I can't hold on to everybody's readings. And so she was recapping and she was telling me about how accurate my reading was. She ended up having a very, very severe accident where she almost died. And it took her out of work, but she was in a job that she was being completely overworked. She was exhausted. She was like hoping to get laid off. And instead, she almost died because she had a work injury. At the time of us doing the reading, she still wasn't back yet. She still hadn't fully recovered. Yeah, that's a wake up call. And that is a very extreme version of a sign from the universe. I'm glad that mine wasn't as scary as that. It was just like, okay, well, it's time to go. And regardless of whether they're saying they want to keep you or not. So whatever that disruptor is, shake to the system. And that's what Kenda was talking about in her chapter. Like that's what she was having with the birth of her son and the complications. Basically, whatever gets us there, as long as we can find that silver lining, remain open and receptive to that massive perspective shift. I mean, that's what the girl I was just talking about who I read recently, that's what Kenda was describing. That's what I've done multiple times over and over and over again. You think you get to a certain point, you have enough perspective shifts, then something else happens. And then you get the next up level. And then now you're looking at certain things in a different way. And maybe some of them are issues that you know you've had and you thought you made an improvement, but now you're like, okay, well, now I'm going to do this. Whether it is different areas of life or whether it is a repeat pattern of something happening over and over and over again, we have these opportunities once we integrate, once we acclimate to the wisdom, experience, advice, changes on our own accord or that have, come upon us, entered into our lives. Once we acclimate to that, universe is like, can't get stale. Got to do something else. Here's another shakeup. And at the time of recording this, we're having a pretty, I'll say volatile, a pretty volatile year in 2026. A lot of people, I'm hearing it. I'm hearing it in my classes. I'm hearing it in my readings. I'm hearing it with friends and family. Everyone's just, oh my gosh, I don't even know what to do. You want to bury your head in the sand. You're tired. You're exhausted. You're burnt out. It's a pressure cooker situation. That's what I hold on to. I go, well, I have my times when I'm struggling in this, but I know because I've been here before, and I know that we're supposed to be paying attention to the details. I've pulled a card in my in my oracle deck. I can't tell you how many times in this first few months of 2026 that's attend to the details. It's like, look at the fine print. Make sure that you're not missing the signs, the messages, that you're reading in between what's being said or done or not. Maybe we can't act upon it now. Maybe we can't understand it now, but keeping track of it. So then later, when things are cleared up, when we're in a better headspace, when we're able to, we can really harness that shift and be able to run with it. The pressure happens. It's diamonds formed under pressure. It's about how you deal with that adversity. And I think this was, again, such a great demonstration in this chapter about harnessing it for good, harnessing it for growth. I mean, she went on this whole journey talking about purpose again, learning about shamanic modalities. I don't even know fully what that means. I would love to learn more. And yeah, by the time I finished reading the chapter, I just completely had chills and just thinking about how we're all connected. It was really making me want to revisit, because it's been quite a while, doing some sort of past life meditation or Akashic Records meditation. So I did put a little reminder in my phone. I used to do those on a semi-regular basis, and that completely dropped off the face of the earth. And yes, we want to connect to the present, but there's so much wisdom and things in that fine print that we might be missing that could really help us get through these tough chapters, get that perspective shift, get that realignment, so that we can find the positive, we can find the opportunities, we can find the right people and be able to progress from there. To start this out, I have a quote, which I am now realizing and looking back at my notes. These 3 chapters are so in alignment, not even necessarily what they were explicitly talking about. Like, I don't know how much of this was on purpose. I'm sure it was. I want to give everybody credit that was working on this book. But what it was eliciting in me, I am not shocked at the segmentation of how I am reading these chapters, because my storyline of interpretation for them and what it's calling forward is so cleanly looped together. Like, the things that I'm talking about today are so different than for those first 4 chapters. But back to Pippa, the quote that I wanted to share from right at the beginning, page 56, quote, "Suffering is like an internal wake-up call. It's like an alarm clock. It's like beep, 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 hello." I've talked about this with people recently. If you are ignoring something, you can have a physical manifestation, literally pain in your body, headaches, muscle tension. You can get sick. Your immune system crashes. So sometimes it's your body has to communicate with you to get your attention because you're not listening. Some of the examples I was giving earlier, you might view it in the moment as suffering if you were laid off from a job, or you break up with someone, or they break up with you, or even if you mutually break up. Loss, death of property or money or having to spend, and that feels like, oh, I have all these things out of pocket, and that feels to you like suffering. Like everybody's definition of suffering is going to be a little bit different. So it's part of why I wanted to start there, because I think it's actually underrated how loaded that is, what we consider to be causes of suffering. And of course, there's a through line to Buddhism in our life. It's not about not suffering. It's about being able to sit with it, to bear witness to it, to find wisdom from it. And I thought, again, this section of chapters were really highlighting that consistently. And something that I was thinking about while reading Pippa's story is that everyone's reaction to suffering is going to be different. So for me, I'm more likely to be like, let me do something about it. Fix, action, Virgo moon, etc., etc. And for other people, it might not be. You might shut down. You might get angry, lash out, seek counsel, seek comfort, seek community. You might just kind of retreat. It's like the fight, flight, freeze type of response. And then you add a little bit of flair to it. Oftentimes I'll do a combination of, okay, I really need to sit and I need to process this. Now, of course, I'll use my intuition. I'll do channel journaling prompts or seek guidance through a reading for somebody else outside of me, oftentimes to validate what I'm getting to come through. I always want to do something like, okay, what can I change? What can I adjust? What am I missing? And how can I course correct? That's just like how I operate. And you could make the argument that isn't always the action that you should be taking. Sometimes you should just be, the thing you should be doing is nothing, because you're resting, because you are integrating. And that's my own journey. But where I'm at now is recognizing that part of the action that feels most aligned. It feels like I'm not in it yet, but I'm on the cusp of it. It's like I feel it coming, and I know for me, it's the perfection year. It's the turn of the dial. We've talked about that in our forecast readings. As my birthday gets closer, then I'm thinking, I'm kind of like interested in doing that, but it's not ready right now. It's not ready right now, but I keep that in mind. And for me, it's having the up level, having that shock to my system, which let me tell you, I've been having that at the beginning of this year, shock to my system, making a bunch of adjustments and changes. I've talked about that in some recent episodes. I'll be talking about that more in the next episode that'll be in the feed. What I've been feeling drawn to do, not right this second, but I know is in the queue, I know I'm being like nudged in this general direction, is finding community and learning, doing some more learning. And I mentioned that in Grace's chapter, like, oh, I can take this book out, learn about the 4 pillars, but it's like a little bug in my ear that it just keeps coming up over and over again, which is how you know it's signs, how you know it's messages, how you know it's intuition, spirit team trying to get your attention. And that isn't the action, the response that I've taken to my individual and witnessing of suffering in the collective. That there's certain actions that I have taken, but what I know is going to help get me to that next step is really finding those connections and establishing relationships with some different people, and then learning some new things and allowing myself to stretch a little bit more. And something that I appreciated that Pippa pointed out is when we have these spiritual up levels, transcendence, as she was saying, what happens is our ego comes into play. So talk about Buddhism again. When we have the ego there, it wants to recreate that experience. It's like, oh, that was awesome. I went through this transformation and now I understand this now and I get that and I'm seeing things so differently. It's like getting a dopamine hit of, oh, that's awesome. I had this candy. It's so good. And so we want to have that again. And so that's part of why we are then pressuring ourselves or getting impatient, or why am I not having another up level, or what am I missing? And then that becomes a negative self-talk situation, and that becomes falling into dysfunctional patterns versus actually being present, but taking the appropriate strides to keep you in alignment, to get you back into alignment, and not making it a competition. Well, I have to be here because other people are here, or I'm seeing other people there. Well, I'm not there yet, but we don't know everybody and everybody's experiences and where they're at. We might think they're here and we're here, but we might actually be in the same spot. Or they may be having days where half the time they're actually below us in connection with purpose, with self, with intuition, with growth. So we don't actually know. And if we're judging what's going on, it's just our perception. It's a perception of what we think. And that's where the whole thing about social media, but also why, like through this podcast, and I do it in my classes too. Sometimes I'll have little sidebars with students and just talking about things that I'm going through or things that I've seen or that other intuitives, people that are in the spiritual space that I'm friendly with or have acquired stories from or books that I've read, that everybody's path is going to look a little bit different. And it's helpful to hear some of those because it gives you some context, but we don't want to take that context and then steep too into comparison. So I think this little tangent here, I think, is a good reminder because we're not very far into the book. We still have many, many chapters left to read, that we want to make sure, for whatever reason this is coming in, to make sure to keep that hat on as we are reading the rest of the stories, that it doesn't have to be about comparison. Well, I didn't have those experiences. Should I be having those? Or, oh, I wish I had that happen to me. Or that sounds terrible. We're just reading, perceiving, grasping, and then taking what resonates. And you could reread these same first 7 chapters 2 years from now and take something different out of them. So the things that I'm sharing are just in the moment, literally in the moment as I was reading and taking notes. What were the things that were leaping out at me? But it's not about the comparison, the right journey, the right speed, the right approach. And I think a lot of the chapters thus far, I know some in the first section, were speaking to that. We don't have to have certain labels. We don't have to have a certain approach. And so I think that where this book kicked off established a bit of that foundation. But then in these chapters here, where there's more of the adversity going on, and these are great stories of resilience and overcoming, and then again, those being the catapults, suffering being a teacher, but it doesn't have to, we don't have to compare whose suffering is worse than others. And we don't have to compare the results of what somebody did with encountering that versus what somebody else did and what's better or what's not. So yeah, that's just my random PSA that popped in. And the last thing that I wanted to mention for Pippa's chapter, I will be messaging her because it said at the end, she was mentioning how she's a mythologist. And I did a double take and I said, excuse me? Not me in the middle of producing and recording a season of this podcast about myth/lore. And she's saying she's a mythologist. And I'm like, I need to talk to her. I'm loving that as I'm reading this book, I'm finding different people where I'm like, oh, let me go to their website. Oh, they have a podcast. Let me look that up. Being able to kind of do what I said before, wanting to find community. So I am hoping to find and connect to more community through this book and kind of giving me the launching pad to just meet some new people with different perspectives who I can learn from and be inspired by as well, because I think we all could use a little bit of inspiration. Final thoughts on this section. So I mentioned the experience for me was very different than for that first batch, chapters 1 through 4. When I read those ones, it had a lot of like third eye activation. I walked away feeling like, oh, super inspired, like jazzed and like lit up. And when I read this section, 5 through 7, it was much more about action. It was like, let me look this up. Let me get this book. Let me contact them because I want to see if I can connect with them, or I could learn from them or work with them or something. Oh no, feng shui, my room is disorganized. My room is dusty. I didn't wait very long to go around and clean my room. Ideas for things to study. It was translating instantly, and I didn't have the same type of activation. It just went straight to, I should do that. Like it moved through me a lot quicker. Changes that I wanted to make, actions that I wanted to take, adjustments that I wanted to put in place. So I thought that was really interesting. And, for that first section, I was stuck more into memories. Like I kept having flashbacks. Whereas for this section, I really wasn't having that. I was mostly focusing on the present and then the future of like, well, what could I do right now? And then what's going to, set me up later. Maybe part of that is because some of the stories that were shared, I didn't live them or haven't lived them yet. It wasn't like sending me back in time. It was just like, wow, okay, that's a really good story. This is some food for thought. And then just being able to translate it without like being sent out of my body over and over again, like I did with the first section. I do not have a reading schedule as of this moment, but you will hear me in upcoming episodes. I will tell you which chapters we're going to be reading. I did, as of today, I mapped out like when I want future book club sessions to come out, but I left the chapters blank because I'm still following my same system of once I finish this, then I'll channel my next reading block. I'll get through what I get through then. And then in the next episode that's going to come out like before it, I'm just making sure to mention at the end, these are the next chapters to read. And it's because at that point I will have already read them. So I'll know these ones are going to be covered, even if I haven't recorded it yet, as I did today. So I did that in an episode earlier where I already knew that I was going to be talking about it because I'd already read the chapters. I'd already prepared my notes for this, and I was recording them back to back. Also wanted to mention, if you want to talk books, of course, let's talk about this book. I would love to know your thoughts on these chapters, on the book overall. No spoilers if you're ahead of me, if you're reading out of order. Feel free to talk to me about chapters 1 through 7 as of this point. You can do that via comments off of this episode, email, DM, and also if you want to talk other books, I'm going to include in the show notes my Fable account. So that's, in case you're not familiar, it's like a Goodreads, but not Amazon. And there's Storygraph. There's a few other different platforms that are creating communities for people to track their books. I love a tracker. Track their books. Fable has some great stats and visuals. And I've done some of the book clubs sometimes on there, but as of late, my reading is kind of operated on a weird schedule, so I haven't been able to sync up and be reading a book at the same time that one of those public book clubs is reading to join. But yeah, so I'll post on there. So I have my reviews. You can see what I'm reading. We can compare profiles. So if you do want to follow me on there and message me and chat, and we can discuss totally other books outside of what we're doing for this book club, feel free. And I also take recommendations. Even though my TBR is currently monstrous, I don't care. I will still take your recommendations. Until next time, happy reading. Oops. Yeah, I don't know. Holy smokes, it's a long chapter. Oh my gosh. Maybe I shouldn't be looking ahead.